So it's been almost 3 years of litigation. You've been fighting the SEC, and there's been a lot of confusion about what this court decision John mentioned actually means. What is the direct impact for your company, Ripple, and for the broader crypto industry right now?
Well, 2.5 years ago when the SEC first sued us, we said publicly that this wasn't just an attack on Ripple, it was an attack on the entire crypto industry. And I think we did see that play out with the SEC getting more and more aggressive in really trying to regulate through enforcement, which we clearly don't think is a healthy way to do it. I think this is a huge win, not just for Ripple, but for the whole industry. I think it really is the first time the SEC has lost a crypto case and really puts the SEC, some of the SEC's narrative and comments that they make publicly about all of these digital assets being securities, it puts that in check, and I think in a very good way.
And the CEO makes a great point here. The SEC has been certainly a bully in the way that they handle things, and for almost 3 years, that they've tried to sue them and tried to, discredit them as securities. And of course, Ripple CEO and Ripple the company has repeatedly, continuously said that they are not a security and they did not break any rules. But this win in the last few days, it really shows that they're really not a security.
It also drives the legislative process, because it doesn't make sense to try to regulate this through enforcement, but rather let's have clear laws about this that allow rules of the road for all entrepreneurs.
And so, Brad, if this undercuts the SEC's argument, who do you think should be policing these tokens? The industry has really been in the headlines for things like fraud and, frankly, grifts in the past 2 years or so. Do you expect Congress to step up? And if not, is there a gap right now in regulation?
Well, I think the SEC, what we found through their emails and during this litigation, is that they even identified that there is a gap. And we saw that in the emails they were exchanging internally. So I think there is a gap. But look, like any industry, you're going to potentially have bad actors. But the vast, vast, vast majority of people I interact with that are builders and using these technologies to build a better infrastructure for financial transactions, for real estate. There are a lot of different use cases for blockchain.
And that says there are a lot of different use cases for the blockchains, because there really are. For the SEC just to come after them, it's really absurd. And it really shows that Gary Gensler did not get a clear understanding of where this industry was going, and that the future of this industry is promising as well. But the government definitely needs to get involved, because if the government doesn't establish guidelines and rules for other companies to follow, then therefore you have crypto scam companies, shadow companies, and all these other seemingly legit companies, but instead they are just companies being held in order to take the investors' money. And so each individual plays a role here. Definitely the government plays a bigger role as far as establishing these crypto guidelines for people to follow.
Crypto that really can be profound. Ripple has been focused on cross-border payments as a starting point. But look, I think you're going to see an incredible number of use cases for these technologies, and having clear rules of the road allows for the investment, allows entrepreneurs to lean in. I think the SEC just has been wrong as a matter of law, and it has really stifled the innovation here in the United States.
Brad, it's clear to see that this is not a win for the SEC, but it's hard to see how it's a win for crypto in the sense that this just puts this back.
I don't think it's hard to see that it's a win for crypto at all. I mean, as you can see that the price of Bitcoin and XRP went up. However, Coinbase can use the same argument as far as their case against the SEC. So it is a win overall for the crypto industry.
Into the lane of either Congress to figure out, and we know how long Congress takes to figure things out, or it just raises the question, when's it going to be clear? It doesn't make sense, frankly, that something's a security sometimes, but not a security other times. It introduces all kinds of uncertainty into transactions and investments that people probably are going to want to hold for more than 2 or 3 years. So how do you feel about the UK Financial Conduct Authority's new proposed rules on crypto assets? Because we might end up somewhere closer to where they're headed.
Look, I feel very good about what we have seen, not just from the UK, but frankly, I mean, the fact that the European Union, 27 countries came together to create something they called MiCA. And the fact that we can't have one country here in the United States provide any leadership or clarity. But look, John, I'll take the other side of some of what you said. There is now clarity. The rule of law in the United States is clear that XRP is not a security when traded on exchanges, when used for payment. There's a whole bunch of things in the judge's ruling that make it very clear about XRP. The SEC has been clear about Bitcoin also. Now, the unfortunate reality is right now there's clarity for two, Bitcoin and XRP. That's not a good thing. I mean, it might be good for Bitcoin and XRP, but
it's certainly a good thing for Bitcoin and XRP and those who are holding these two coins. Definitely Ethereum is up there as well, but the fact that XRP is no longer considered a security, it's great for the Ripple holders.
Reason why we have been calling for clarity for years, even before this lawsuit, and it's, I think, really a call to action from Congress. You saw representatives like Tom Emmer tweeting yesterday that this really is yet another call to action. And I'm optimistic we're actually going to see some forward momentum in Washington to provide some of the clarity that the SEC has really been fighting in some ways and almost sowing confusion.
Try to understand how future cases might be settled. Now, Ripple Labs CEO came out saying that the SEC has, quote, sowed confusion in the market and really been a bully going after weak players who couldn't mount proper defenses. We're joined now by Devin Ryan, Director of Financial Technology Research at JMP Securities, a Citizens company. So let me just ask you, at first blush, this seems like a huge win for Ripple customers, at least people who own the tokens. I dive into the ruling and it looks like the sales on the secondary market are a little bit cloudy. They're just maybe highlight for some of the people in the audience here what the various facets of this ruling mean.
Hey, good morning, Jared. I think the biggest thing that
I honestly think that the SEC has played the bully role in this whole ordeal as far as going after these crypto companies. However, it needed to be done. And the fact that because there are a lot of crypto scams out there, but it won cases against these crypto companies, but it just couldn't do it against the Ripple and Ripple Labs and XRP because they have their pockets are heavy, right? Ripple spent almost $200 million on this case, and it paid off for them because they won.
Away from the ruling is really around XRP, the token, and our understanding from reading the summary judgment was that the token itself is not the security. Which I think has very important read-throughs to the rest of the industry. But then the other piece of it is that depending on how the token is sold, that will deem whether it's a security or not. So on one hand, the institutional sales to institutions were deemed as securities transactions, and that piece of the case is going to go to trial. And then the retail transactions and the trading on exchanges, my interpretation is that that is not deemed as securities transactions. So if you think about the implication for firms like Coinbase or others in the industry that run exchanges, I think this is a very good outcome, but this is just one piece of the puzzle. This doesn't end other regulatory actions that are happening concurrent to the Ripple case. And so we'll have to continue to follow from here, but definitely a win, as you mentioned.
Yes. Well, let me ask you about other court cases that are pending right now. There's been a huge crackdown on crypto in general. Gary Gensler, chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission, is on record saying that everything except Bitcoin may be a security that needs to be registered. Well, that's a pretty blanket statement right there. How does this ruling affect or maybe put some shade on those statements by Chair Gensler?
Yeah, well, I think what the industry is looking for is clarity here, and there's been a lack of clarity. And so there's statements made by regulators, but then there's actions that seem to go against some of those statements. So what we just learned, at least in one court, is that the view is that certain digital tokens, including XRP, are not inherently securities. And so that gives at least clarity for now around that one topic. But I think that will continue to be challenged. Where I think the industry here is going is really that to the point of we need there to be legislation. There needs to be action out of D.C. And is some progress on that front. And I think that this ruling could help accelerate that. And so that would that's one point that I think is positive and something that people are kind of taking out of this ruling, that this may be an accelerant to getting more done in DC on the topic and really defining the rules of the road, because that's really what the industry has been lacking. And so therefore, this ruling is a positive, but we still don't have clear rules of the road, and that still needs to come here.
And you mentioned legislative action. That would probably be the clearest, because then you have the intent of.
And actually, we're all waiting on legislative action in order to move this industry forward in the U.S. at least. And we all know that internationally, crypto is moving. They're not really waiting for the U.S. to make up their minds. These other countries are moving forward full speed ahead with what they believe is going to be the next future as far as payments, building companies and industries is concerned. And they're moving forward, and that is why Ripple and Coinbase and all these other companies have seek partnerships outside of the U.S. The U.S. just needs a little bit more clarity and clear guidelines in order to make these things happen.
Representatives in Congress who represent the American people making the case instead of trying to reinterpret decades-old securities laws. Is there a chance that we see any kind of incremental regulation on the crypto front, or from Congress, or do we have to wait for the SEC and other agencies that have been very slow to give guidance to finally give that guidance?
Yeah, I think that's the hope, that Congress is already looking at certain legislation, and there's been some that has been progressing. And so I think the hope here is that we get action on that over the next year or so, and if some of that is potentially going to accelerate just on the heels of this ruling, which adds kind of more of a legal framework from the courts around how they're thinking about it. Again, it's one court, one ruling that pushes the industry forward in that direction. And that's also, if you take a step back and you look at how a lot of these stocks or related stocks have reacted and been reacting, it's been very favorable because it's essentially adding, I think the probability more in their favor. And so that's been something that just even over the past week, you've seen some pretty significant moves. And so, there's still a lot of work to be done for the industry. There's still a lack of clarity. This one ruling in and of itself does not create precedent, but you need to start somewhere. And I think this is definitely something that's positive, and the industry is going to use this momentum to try to get, I think, more action in DC, which is really, again, what's going to create the real definition and the rules of the road for the industry.
Well, let me ask you then, we have just under a minute to go. Anything we haven't covered here, anything that you'd like to highlight that you think could drive either tailwinds or headwinds for these crypto tokens, stocks, anything in there?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is institutional adoption. I know that's something that people have been talking about for years, but we really...
Institutional adoption is key. In order for institutional adoptions to take place, we need to have regulatory clarity. Congress needs to have some bylaws in order for companies to follow. And once institutional investors put in their money, then retail investors will in turn feel comfortable in putting their money as well. So that's basically what we're waiting on to see what the next step of this crypto industry is going to do.
In kind of a traditional way. And the reason being is because institutions acting as fiduciaries for their customers really need to have clarity around regulation. And so, this is a positive step, but this does not bring full clarity. And so, I would say that we've been in an environment where, capital has been constrained, and because of the uncertainty, institutions have not been in the space. To the extent we get more, positive developments, just like we saw last week, that could really be the catalyst to drive what I would say real capital into this industry. And that's going to do a couple things. It's going to accelerate innovation in the industry, and it's also going to accelerate adoption, I think, both on the institutional side, but it'll also drive more retail folks into the space and understanding what the different types of innovations are in blockchain. So to me, that's really what we're looking for. A little bit more clarity. This is a positive step, but a progression here so that institutions can really come in and bring capital with them into the space. And I think that's really lacking, but I do think that that's coming here because the space is not going away. There's so much money that's already in the space.